Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Please check out the KCC Discord linked in the description down below. There you can talk to me and a whole bunch of KCC fans who hang out there on a regular basis. I look forward to seeing you there. Our first story today comes to us from Mogul Dodger. Since you're going to be petty, let's jump right in. This is a story from my past when the markets were tanking about a decade ago. I worked for a small company, less than 12 people, headquartered in a northeastern US city about 4 hours from my home. I was employed for over a year, and we definitely had our struggles as we were a small startup that had a lot of politics. I became sick with cancer that fall, and my surgery and treatment ended on December 31st, as I was determined not to go into the new year with this burden. I was given 10 days into the new year to return to work as I would be fully recovered. I had to provide a doctor's note both to my employer and insurance company. I was on temp disability that I was fit to return to work. I work remotely from home and I was the only employee to do so. It was treated as a bonus by my management team. This becomes important as I was required to be in the HQ every Thursday for an 8 a.m. team meeting, but I was not allowed to book a hotel. They fought my travel expenses every month down to the mile. Once my expenses were rejected, as I added 5 miles to their web map, as I needed to justify my need to get gas and my departure from the highway, I mistakenly submitted actual mileage. They trained me well. I started each Thursday at 3 a.m. driving to make the team meeting and was required to work the full day, which meant a departure after 6 p.m. So one workday each week was 3 a.m. to 11 p.m., depending on traffic. It was not fun, but there was going to be a significant upside that would have made it worthwhile. I was laid off while at the doctor's office getting my note. I was surprised to check my BlackBerry, yes, it was a long time ago, with an email that read simply, "As the group has failed to live up to the expectations we had, we have decided to close your team and group. You have 48 hours to return all company property." I should add that no one from management ever actually checked in or asked how I was doing, either during my treatment or after. I was pretty angered by this email as we grew the company's revenue by over 31% year over year. The email made me actually read my guidelines for employment, and I found out that I had to only make the equipment available to them. And I replied simply that they were welcome to come pick up the equipment, PC, monitor, etc., but I required 48 hours notice and I would require them to arrive and depart during business hours. I was told I was being petty. I had months of expenses awaiting reimbursement, which equated to thousands that I had little faith they would be paid to me as they were submitted before my treatment. They informed me that if I mailed back all supplies, they would pay it along with my outstanding expenses. I didn't trust them and told them that if they made arrangements at one of 3 possible locations, their choice, I would drop off the equipment, but they would pay all shipping and packaging costs directly to the service provider. I delivered every packing box, notebook, business card, monitor, and laptop, anything I had ever touched of theirs, with the explicit instructions that, as I had been threatened several times with failure to comply, warnings in their follow-up emails about the condition of each item, I photographed every item. Apparently, they were not very nice to the packing store either, as they made an impression in just arranging the service. The store employees shared this with me while I unloaded the car. I watched them bubble wrap empty boxes and carefully place those boxes inside larger boxes. Lesson learned, it pays to read the terms of employment and just be a genuinely nice person. OP mentioned in the comments down below that he did finally get his expenses paid, but it took them several more months to do it. I sat back and thought about this one for a minute after reading it. The shipping company could have been a little bit more maliciously compliant. They could have just done individual boxes and sent them all out to cost the company a lot more money. I think that would have been a better way to end this one. Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. This next story comes to us from Med School Life Sucks. Do your presentation for you? Okay, let's jump right in. This happened yesterday and I can't stop laughing about it still. I'm doing a rotation and the resident came up to me asking for a favor and I said sure. He was super busy and wanted me to put together a presentation for him that he has to give tomorrow. So I said yeah, why not? I can squeeze some time today and put it together. He's super thankful and says we'll catch up in a few. This dude comes up and has nothing, like no research, no notes, absolutely nothing, and wants me to do his work for him, summarize it, and put it together. Not only that, but he wants it by no later than 9 p.m. today, with a sly, keep this between us look. I was so caught off guard and was so close to telling him to go F himself, but then a wonderful idea crossed my mind. Malicious compliance time. I wrote up the crappiest presentation I could humanly muster. I'm talking typos, incorrect facts, obnoxious slide colors, a transition between every transition, and random sound effects in random slides like some PowerPoint landmine. An absolute atrocity. It was beautiful. 9 p.m. rolls in and my phone is blowing up. The resident is asking me about the presentation. I'm very sorry, I'm almost done with it, but I need to finish some questions in my block, and then I'll wrap it up and send it right away. OP, that's very unprofessional. You should have prioritized it first and then worried about your block. The presentation's at 10:30 a.m., and I need to spend some time to go over it. Again, I'm very sorry. I'll send it shortly. I turn off my phone and send it to him at 1 a.m., giddy as all hell. At this point, I should mention, he's expected to do this presentation himself and not delegate it. And if it's found out he had someone else do it, he'll get in trouble and get chewed out. So he can't even blame me. Immunity. I walk into the hospital today at 8 a.m. sharp, and I'm greeted by him, and he looks effing furious. It legit took every fiber of my being to not burst into laughter in front of him. I was dying. As the day goes, he disappears for an hour or so. He had to redo everything in a panic, but still managed to come up with a material presentation in almost an hour and did okay, which honestly was pretty impressive. He had it in him and could have done it easily, but was lazy and tried to take advantage of me. The good thing is now I know for sure he won't be asking me to do his work for him anymore, and leave me alone. Today was a good day. I'm actually really amazed that if the resident didn't take the time to work on it themselves, that they actually reviewed it before they had to give the presentation in the morning. I was fully expecting this story to go to the boardroom where they were giving the presentation, and for them to be absolutely screwed over by it in front of so many people. I guess sometimes stories just don't end the way we hope they do, but this one was still pretty good. This next story comes to us from Nothing to See Here. Pissed I took a long lunch? Okay, pay me overtime, and then some. Let's jump right in. I've seen plenty of the employer time watching posts. I guess it's time to share mine. I was a specialized skilled tradesman about 20 years ago. I still am now, but in a slightly different field. This particular field is almost always a small business, and this was no exception. I worked full-time in a shop with my boss, his brother, and maybe 2 other part-time employees at the time. Since there was only a handful of us, there was no formal timekeeping. I was full-time, so he would pay me 40 hours a week. Actually, he liked the old semi-monthly system, so 8 hours a day for 12 to 14 days a check, which worked out fine by me. At the time, my wife's work was only about 2 blocks away from mine, so we would carpool nearly every day. Her job was a more corporate, cube farm type job that kept more formal time records, so she would have to be there by a specific time, take a specific amount of time for lunch, etc. She also ended up putting in a small amount of overtime, usually less than an hour every day. Since she was supposed to be to work before my job's business hours, I would drop her off, let myself into the shop, and get my day started a little bit early, often helping out by getting things started for my boss or his brother. I didn't mind, just something to do at the beginning of the day. This routine actually resulted in me being in the shop doing work-related activities about 9 hours, sometimes more a day, without overtime. Part of the routine was me meeting my wife for lunch, which would have me out of the shop 30 to 60 minutes every day. Worked well, life was good. One day, my wife had a doctor's appointment. It was scheduled midday, and rather than just taking her car to work that day, or having me leave the car with her for the day, she asked me to go with her. The doctor's office is about 15 minutes from work. It wasn't for anything serious and shouldn't take too long, so we should be there and back in about an hour. It turned out the office was running a bit behind, and we had to wait a good amount of time for her to see her doctor. It took me just over an hour and a half to get back to the shop. I didn't say anything to my boss when I left since I wasn't planning on taking any longer than usual, and it wasn't any of his business. Besides, we're both professional adults and we can act as such. I figured he'd ask why I took so long. I'd tell him what happened and no harm, no foul. Instead, he just looked at his watch and then the clock on the wall when I walked in and said nothing. Okay, whatever. I'm usually longer than 8 hours every day. I guess he realizes that, right? Wrong. By the start of the next pay period, about a week and a half, he had installed a time clock. It's obvious what happens next. He went from paying me 8 hours a day to up to 9 or more a day, just because he was annoyed I took a long lunch one day. This is typical trip over dollars to save dimes mentality of his. Wait, it gets better. Remember how I said he liked the good old-fashioned semi-monthly payday system? Well, actually calculating pay that way confused him, so he would calculate payroll as if he was paying bi-weekly. So this genius of geniuses was paying me 1 to 3 days of overtime every pay period for only being there just over 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I tried pointing that out to him, but he wouldn't listen, so I just cashed my checks and was happy. Eventually, I started to get sick of his business practices and attitude and started working shorter and shorter hours. Since he was paying me extra anyway, it gave me time to work on the side or work second jobs. He ended up laying off myself and another full-time employee eventually, since his backwards business sense wasn't managing to make any money for some reason. I was so relieved. I struggled for a little while, but ended up changing my career focus slightly and am doing just fine. I was trying to figure out what was going on with this pay schedule they were on and how they got paid extra money. It was explained a little bit better in the comments, but it's still a little fuzzy. What I saw in the comments was, it can be a bit of a pain if the pay period ends or starts in the middle of the week. You still have to calculate overtime by the week, even if it's dissected by the pay period. That's why almost all hourly employees these days are bi-weekly. So it seems to me like the overtime hours were getting double dipped on the paycheck, I guess, because if the pay period ended halfway through the week, they were getting the overtime hours for that week on one paycheck, and then I think they were getting them again on the next one. But it wasn't very clear. Let me know what you guys think on that one, comment down below. This next story comes to us from Lizard Queen. Want to demand employees come in early without pay and stay strapped to their desks until the clock strikes time off? You got it. Let's jump right in. I work in a demanding industry. As a result, barely anyone in my department takes their unpaid 1-hour lunch break in full or at all, including myself. Most everyone just eats at their desk while working, including me. A lot of people work unpaid overtime as well, including me. For me, it was about 1 to 2 hours this week on my day off unpaid overtime to get on top of the work. The manager and boss knows this happens. They see it occur on a daily basis, but don't contest it because, free labor. Recently, the boss sent around an office-wide email for a select few that stated, "Work hours are work hours." The email said that they expect everyone to be at work 10 to 15 unpaid minutes early to get a coffee and start work on the dot. They also said that the end of your work shift is when you stop working and that you can't pack up anything prior. If you have a cup at your desk, you have to wait until your work ends on the dot to put it in the dishwasher. Doing this 2-minute task prior to the end of your shift is not acceptable. There was more to the email, but it's not relevant to this post. I'm certain this email is partially directed at me because I arrived to work only a few minutes early, grab a cup of tea, takes 1 minute, they have instant hot water, and then start working. I also asked to leave 10 minutes early last week, used 10 minutes of my unpaid break to attend an appointment, which was met with discontent from my manager. Cue this week and the email that followed. Now, this would be a reasonable policy if there was any form of time theft happening, but it's the complete opposite. They are well aware that their employees are working through their lunch breaks and working overtime to stay on top of the high workload, and essentially providing them with free labor. Therefore, demanding employees come in early and remain strapped to their desks until the clock strikes at the end of the workday is not a reasonable policy. It's just demeaning and glossing over the fact that they are getting free labor on a daily basis from dedicated employees. So today, as a response to this email, I took my full 1-hour break for the first time in literally months. I sat in the break room on my phone for 1 hour. This resulted in the manager walking past, seeing me doing this and looking very unimpressed. They're used to seeing me sitting in my office, working in between bites of food as a break. They walked past a second time while I was still in the break room, this time completely avoiding my gaze. Having maliciously complied today, I've decided what to do moving forward to continue this malicious compliance. From now on, I will come into work 5 minutes early and sit at my desk on my phone until my phone alarm signals that it's time to start working. I will take my unpaid break for the full 1 hour during the day rather than sit at my desk working through this unpaid time. In a month, when they are used to me taking my full unpaid break, I will work through the day and take my 1 hour unpaid break exactly 1 hour before the end of my workday, meaning I will not return to the office after my break because my workday has ended. There is nothing in our contract that dictates when we can or can't take our break. I have and will continue to maliciously comply, denying them the free labor they took for granted and fully utilizing my unpaid personal time. OP, there's a couple of things you really need to do in this case. Get in touch with your coworkers. Get some of your close colleagues to do the exact same thing you're doing. Because you doing it, you're just a blip on the radar. If a bunch of people get in on it as well, then that's how you actually make change happen. This next story comes to us from Grumpy in DE. Totally legal and apt revenge on loud neighbor. Let's jump right in. I live in Germany. Germany is a nation of rules. Sometimes that can be a really nice thing. Like when people recycle, or wear masks, or when your boss reminds you that you aren't supposed to call the office when you are off sick because you are sick. Seriously, it's a great place to live. There are also rules about noise. No lawnmowers on Sunday, no loud machinery on any day after 8 p.m. It's called Nachtruhe, night quiet. There are specific rules for time of day and types of noise. Children playing and crying doesn't usually count as noise, by the way. For 2.5 years, I lived in a small apartment on the second floor, German first floor, of a building in a quiet residential area. 1 bedroom, 1 kitchen and living room, no balcony or shared garden. All of my windows were on one side of the building, overlooking my neighbor's garden. When I viewed the apartment in November, I thought this would be a nice thing. When I was inside, I looked out at his trees. What I didn't realize at the time was that his little garden shed was jammed to the rafters with equipment, all of it motorized. Lawnmower, hedge trimmers, edge trimmers, leaf blowers, verticutter, look it up, it's usually only used on places like golf courses, power washers. And from late March until early October, he was outside at least 5 days a week until 8 p.m. on the dot, making sure that not a single leaf on his 6-foot hedges was out of line. That not one blade of grass grew above 2 centimeters tall. He power washed his BMW every weekend and invited friends over so that he could power wash their cars. He dismantled the seats and stood them in the garden and power washed them. And before you say, oh, how typically German, he wasn't German. Finally, in about July of the second summer, he decided that his freakishly perfect hedge was too unruly and decided to replace it with a 2-meter, 7-foot metal and plastic fence. To accomplish this, he chainsawed down the hedge, then used the chainsaw to cut the hedge into pieces the size of toothpicks, before using some kind of giant vacuum to suck the toothpicks into bags. All of this was taking place in the evenings when he and I got home from work. 3 hours every evening. After 2 weeks, the hedge was gone. Now came the fence. But apparently, the fence needed to go up to the exact edge of his property line, and there were cobblestones in the way. So he got some kind of circular saw used for cutting stone and started cutting about 5 centimeters, 2 inches off each cobblestone, directly underneath my windows for 3 hours at a time. Now, I should explain that my building only had 3 apartments. The guy on the ground floor was a long-distance bus driver and was gone for weeks at a time. The guy above me owned a pub and left his place around 3 p.m. and didn't get back till after midnight. On the third day of stonecutting, I went downstairs, nearly in tears, and asked how much longer this was going to take. Until it's done. Couldn't he take a couple of days off work and get it done in one go, instead of dragging it out every evening for weeks? Why should I? I stop at 8 p.m. That's all the law requires. But this has been going on for weeks already. He tells me that he knows it pisses me off because he sees me closing my windows whenever he's working outside, but he is doing nothing illegal, so it's not his problem. I spent about a week trying to figure out how to get back at him. Throw seed bombs of noxious weeds into his gardens? Too slow. And if I got caught, probably illegal. I'm an immigrant too, and don't want the hassle. Stuff anchovies in the air intake of his precious BMW? Quicker, but definitely illegal. And then it came to me. I cracked open my windows, pointed my speakers towards his garden, cranked up the volume, and put the worst music I could find on repeat. I programmed it to turn off at exactly 8 p.m. After all, I didn't want to break the law, and then I left and went to a friend's place. I really wasn't planning on doing this long term. On the second day, I came back after it had been playing for about an hour and turned it off. I heard him talking to a friend below my window. Their conversation went like this: "Who would do something like this? Only a woman." I turned the music back on. The next day, I stopped. I never heard the rock cutter again. The machinery noise was significantly reduced, and I moved to another city a few months later. Regrettably, I don't stand up for myself very often, but I look back on this with enormous pleasure. So many different songs pop into my head that you could torture somebody with for like that much time on a regular basis. Like, come on, Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up? How about Baby Shark? The song that doesn't end? There's so many more. I'd love to hear what you guys would play. Comment down below. Check out OP, linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.